you have to kind of ditch a macronutrient to get the aesthetics that you want. Most of the time, what people are doing to get in good shape, they are either getting rid of carbs or they're getting rid of fat. Imagine doing a carnivore diet and then not having any results. I know there's a lot of comments too about steroids. People are always like, oh, well, Mark, injects hormones, so he doesn't have to worry about his hormones. I'm still concerned about my hormones. For a lot of people, I think it's a good idea to start with less than 50 grams of fat a day. Restriction. I put out a video the other day about restriction. And I talked about how you're going to have to restrict one macronutrient at least in order to get the weight loss that you want and in order to get the aesthetics that you'd like. And sometimes even have to lose out on 2 macronutrients. And when I talk about, lowering or negating or bringing down and stuff like that, I don't really usually mean 0, although occasionally if I tell you 0, then I meant 0. But for the most part, if I'm talking about, very low carb, or if I say 0 carb or something like that, I usually don't say 0 carb because there is really no such thing. Like, there's going to be a carbohydrate in something that you eat. We even found out on the show that there's tiny amounts of glycogen sometimes in certain types of meat, especially things like liver. So it's hard to be like 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0 carb. Additionally, same thing with 0 fat. Like, there's going to be fat in some vegetables. There's going to be fat in some. It's just like it's everywhere. It's in something. But we're talking about negligible, very, very tiny amounts that really don't matter a whole lot. But when I'm talking about restriction and I'm saying you have to kind of ditch a macronutrient to get the aesthetics that you want, you'll find that to be true every single time. With maybe some exception, with some small exceptions of people that just count the calories. Because you could potentially put your calories in the basement at like 1,600 or 1,400 or something like that, and could potentially have a decent macro split, 30% of each one or something like that, potentially. Or, just a small hike up in the protein, and then everything else is like, somewhere in between that. That's like a small exception. The reason why I say that's the exception and not the rule is because people usually don't choose to do that. It is normally not very sustainable for a lot of people because you're having mixed macros. When you have mixed macros, it makes it easier to overeat. Now, if you're somebody that just isn't crazy hungry and you don't look at food as a form of entertainment, then you could pick that choice and you could count calories and you wouldn't have to necessarily nix a macronutrient. But to be clear, most of the time what people are doing to get in good shape, they are either getting rid of carbs or they're getting rid of fat. AKA, they're either running off of carbs or they're running off of fat. Normally, you pick a lane. And when you want to get shreddy poo, shreddy McShredderoo, shreddy McShredderton, you want to head to Shred City and build a shreddiness hotel and breakfast egg white place. Then when you're trying to get shredded, then you might eliminate 2 macronutrients. And again, not completely 100% get rid of them, but you're going to bring them down very, very low in some cases. So sometimes what that looks like is like a bodybuilder that's about to get on stage. They might primarily be hammering some very, very lean sources of protein and vegetables. And so the macronutrient that they're running off of is primarily protein. Now they're smart enough to understand that, like, oh, I don't want everything just coming from protein. And so they'll throw in some carbohydrate to keep themselves anabolic, to keep themselves from getting catabolic, to keep themselves from basically turning those proteins into glucose, turning those amino acids into glucose. Not that that's necessarily a bad thing, but when you're bodybuilding, you're trying to preserve muscle mass. You're trying to hold on to muscle mass. And because you're trying to hold muscle mass, you not only need to make sure that you have enough protein, you also need to make sure that you have enough carbohydrates so that you have the mechanism, the main mechanism that's responsible for protein muscle synthesis, which is strength training, having some sort of mechanical load, mechanical tension on the body. That has to be done in order for hypertrophy to occur, for you to get like kind of maximum results with building some muscle mass. So the protein is going to stay fairly high in most cases, whether somebody goes high fat or they go high carb. Either situation, the protein is going to stay the same. The protein is going to stay, we'll just say 200. It's easy just to think of someone being 200 pounds. Or someone's 180 pounds, 150 pounds, and they have 150 grams of protein a day, and they double up on their carbohydrate. It's like, what are the calories on that? Not a lot. 150 grams of protein in a day and like 300 grams of carbohydrate. It's really not a lot of food, right? But sometimes that's what people will get peeled off of. Sometimes that's what people will get very lean off of. And in some cases, like I'm saying, is some people will really lower the macronutrients of both of them. I shot this video talking about restriction, laid a lot of stuff out, and I think people sometimes just like shout stuff out, and they don't think a lot about what they just said, and they also don't really listen to the video that much. And so this reply came on one of the last videos I did talking about restriction. And again, I continue to mention and promote that many diets will work. A low carbohydrate diet worked great for me. And it worked even better when I started to reduce the amount of fat that I was consuming, because years ago, when I was doing low fat, I'd sometimes be in the 200 to 300 grams of fat in a day. That went on for a while. That went on for a few years. And then also I was depriving myself of carbohydrates so much that, once a week or every other week, I'd have like a cheat meal and stuff like that. And so it just wasn't locked in 100% to what I was doing, but it worked. And it worked really well. I lost over 100 pounds doing that. In terms of carnivore, I mentioned this many times. I like carnivore as an intervention, but like whenever I suggest carnivore, I usually just tell people, hey, mainly eat meat and eat some vegetables. Maybe occasionally throw in some starch, for the muscle building, or for the effects of being able to have better output during training sessions and so on. That might be a good idea. So anyway, in mentioning some of these things, somebody says, hey, almost like, explain how I lost 70 pounds, doing a carnivore diet. Well, I did explain how you lost 70 pounds doing a carnivore diet because you cut out a macronutrient. In this case, you cut out all of their foods too. So I hope that you end up having great results, because imagine doing a carnivore diet and then not having any results. Like, that would really suck. Most people that have done the carnivore diet, most people that have followed it have gotten results, maybe except for some that are misguided. Where someone says, eat as much as, once somebody says, eat as much as you want, you got to be careful. When someone says you can eat a lot of it, that's different, because we know from like the sugar diet, you can hammer down a lot of carbohydrates and you could still either remain the same weight or even lose weight. And we know from people doing these other diets, carnivore, keto, we know that people can eat tremendous amounts of fat. I just told you guys I had 200 to 300 grams of fat and still lost 100 pounds. 200 to 300 grams of fat a day and still lost a tremendous amount of weight. I think, over time, I started to learn, like the last maybe 6 or 8 years or so, I started to learn, okay, I don't need 150 to 200 grams of fat. There's just no need for it. So I started to bring it down to like 150, 125 and stuff like that, and got it to more reasonable numbers. And nowadays I eat more carbohydrate, so I have reduced the amount of fat that I consume by a lot. I've cut it. Again, it used to be 200-300. And now it's like 40 or 50 on a lot of days. And it feels like it's plenty. It feels good to me. I know there's a lot of comments too about, steroids. People are always like, oh, well, Mark, injects hormones, so he doesn't have to worry about his hormones. I'm still concerned about my hormones. Just because I'm injecting some hormones doesn't mean that I'm just going to disregard. I'm not trying to override anything with an injection of testosterone by any means. I still think it's of value for your body to feel healthy enough to, even though I'm not producing my own testosterone, I think that there would be other detrimental, side effects if my fats were way too low. And just to clear things up on that, I oftentimes will recommend, I say for a lot of people, I think it's a good idea to start with less than 50 grams of fat a day. And I think for a lot of people, the majority of people, I think if they land on about 30 grams of fat a day, they'll find a diet that is going to allow them to eat often. And it's going to give them a diet that's going to allow them to perform really well in the gym or with other exercise activities that they like to do. And on top of that, they're going to be able to feel strong and hold on to a good amount of muscle mass. Now, if you feel like shit or whatever, okay, of course, bring your fats up a little bit. Not a big deal. But anyway, the way that this guy lost 70 pounds on the carnivore diet was through cutting out a macronutrient. So, yeah, that's great that you lost 70 pounds. I am happy for you. And then there was a little back and forth, too, in the comment section. Another guy kind of mentioned how he lost weight doing two different things. He lost weight doing the carnivore diet, and then he switched from the carnivore diet to a high-carb, low-fat diet and had great results with that as well. I don't know if it says how much weight or whatever.
Yeah, it says, I lost 46 pounds on carnivore installed in cutting and energy in the gym. Switched to high-carb, low-fat, lost another 28 pounds, and it was so much easier. My body looks so much more full and muscular on carbs / low fat. Energy in the gym on carbs is insane, especially since the scale continues to trend downward.
That's great. And, maybe he had to do that low carb diet first to get to this other one. Maybe like people need an entry point. And if you tell someone that loves ribeye and loves buffalo wings that the entry point is 20 grams of fat, they're going to be like, see you later. They're not going to want to be part of that. You can't even really get them to listen after that. They're like, oh, I got to get rid of ranch dressing and sour cream. And it's like, hold on a second. Actually, there's a diet where you can have some of those things in there. I used to eat a lot of those things. Over time, I learned that, okay, there's some choices that aren't so wise when it comes to dressings and stuff. And I shouldn't really have ranch dressing and stuff like that, right? So you learn as you go. And as you go, you refine. As you learn, you make things better. And what I love sharing with people is that you have multiple options when it comes to diet. Just like you saw with this guy. He lost a considerable amount of weight with both styles of nutrition. He lost a considerable amount of weight doing low carb and lost a considerable amount of weight doing low fat. You get to pick. You get to choose. And also, what's wrong with having a reset every once in a while? What about for some of you that have drifted out and just kind of got lost? What about some of you that maybe followed the sugar diet? Maybe followed some of the advice that I was pumping out or that Cole was pumping out. And you started doing it, but then you see that Cole's eating Subway sandwiches and you hear me talking about my bodybuilding stuff more. I'm eating, eating a little bit more like a bodybuilder right now. And maybe you lost your way in that because you were maybe motivated and persuaded into doing some of the stuff that we were doing, but then you just like lost your way a little bit and you had, a birthday cake at someone's party. You ate some ribs, because college football is back on TV and you're sitting in front of the TV and you're huddling up watching some football. You know what I mean? Like you fell, you lost your way. Well, how about we start to have some ways to reset? How would we reset? Well, what do I talk about often? What did I write in the War on Carbs? War on Carbs, I talked about fasting into stuff and fasting out of it. It's one of the simplest things you can possibly do. Let's say yesterday I ate poorly, right? And today it's now It's now 1 o'clock. So for today, if I made it to 1 o'clock without eating or with just eating something very small, that would be the exact way I would have handled eating like crap the day before. Fast in, fast out. It doesn't have to be a crazy fast. I'm not talking about 20 hours or 16 hours. You just go from like 9 p.m. until like anywhere between 11 and onward. You know, you pick when you want to discontinue it. It's plenty. That's plenty. Resets you, okay? And let's say you're in a little bit of a funk and you keep thinking about bread and you keep thinking about these other things and you're trying to lose weight, but you're stuck, but you're, at the moment, you're more high carb. Flip the script, man. Go low carb. Ditch the carbs. Get rid of them for a bit. You know, getting rid of your carbohydrate or getting rid of your fat for a little bit is not, it's not anything that's going to mess with anything. It's not going to mess anything up. I know Cole is championing that, you know, fats really slow down your metabolism. I don't know. Maybe they do, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't eat them. And it doesn't mean that you can't still utilize a low carb approach here and there. If you lost your way and you find yourself stuffing your body full of muffins again, well, then maybe you gotta, you know, maybe you have to make a sacrifice. Maybe you have to, you know, create another restriction so that you don't stay in this funk. These are real world things that happen to people in the real world. And I think a lot of other influencers out there and a lot of people that you guys might listen to, they have never been fat before. And just because they've never been fat doesn't mean they can't give you advice on how you can stay away from being fat. But they never really been there. They, like, maybe they don't have, you know, my whole family growing up, like everyone was, you know, at some point had to get concerned about their weight or had to have some concern about their weight because they were just too heavy. Too heavy for this, too heavy for that, too heavy just in terms of like their health. Like it was just unhealthy. Not that everyone in my family is like mega obese or anything, but my mother dealt with obesity. I mean, she died from obesity. My dad is like 5'2", and he's pretty, you know, he's been heavy most of his life. And a lot of aunts and uncles and stuff like that too. Everyone's real heavy. And so I've seen what it looks like in the real world. I have a lot of friends that are heavy, and I see what it looks like. And I think that I see it differently because I grew up around it. I see it differently because I was super heavy myself. Literally super heavy. SHW. I was a super heavyweight when I was powerlifting. And okay, I got big for a sport and stuff too, but I was obese. I was there. I was 330 pounds. I was obese. There's no questions about it. There's nothing else you can really say about it other than that. I was obese. My legs were red. My shins were like bright red. My face was bright red. You know, I was just, my blood pressure was high. My red blood cell count was high. Cholesterol was all like just lipid profile was way out of whack, you know. And so, you know, over time, I just started to learn, you know, how to kind of, you know, turn the corner on some of that. And it was a diet that I did when I was younger. It was a ketogenic style diet, a carnivore, not even a carnivore diet. I hate saying carnivore diet because I want to be accurate. And it wasn't really even like a medical ketogenic diet, but I did do a lot of Dan Duchaine stuff. I started doing that when I was like about 18, 19 years old. Dan Duchaine wrote the book Body Opus. I also read the book, The Metabolic Diet, which was then turned into the Anabolic Diet by Mauro Di Pasquale, which was another low carb protocol with a carb up like on the weekend or a carb up like once a week or something like that. And these are some diets that I followed, and they helped me tremendously to manage and to lose weight. And so I sometimes will hear, you know, people touting, you know, one particular diet protocol, and I just don't think that makes sense. I don't think one particular diet protocol, you know, and maybe I used to think that, maybe a little bit, but I mean, I've been aware of this stuff for a while, and I've been communicating about this stuff for a while. Even when I was touting low carb, I was saying that other diets work. I told you guys that when I did my bodybuilding show, I utilized carbohydrates. So it wasn't like I've been trying to hold out or hold any secrets. It's just that I believe more strongly in this now than ever. And I know that you guys want like a particular, like direct message to ride on. And my particular direct message to ride on right now is that if you're strength training and you're trying to be jacked and tan, then there is no better diet than a low-fat diet. You don't even have to say low-fat, high-carb because it doesn't always have to be high-carb. Just because it's in the absence of fat does not mean that your carbs have to be like crazy, that they have to be high. Which, you know, it's unfortunate, but like trying to define some of these things is tough. I would say if you go double body weight in carbohydrates, that would be high. If you weigh 200 and you go with 400 grams of carbohydrates a day, I would say it's on the higher end. I wouldn't say it's excessive or anything. It's just on the higher end. Like that's probably a perfect amount for someone that weighs 200 pounds that maybe is already a little bit lean. That's training hard. If you're 200 pounds and you're 20% body fat, then going more around 300 carbs would be more appropriate. And the lower that you bring those carbs, probably the easier it'll be to like manage your weight. However, you might feel tired. Your workouts might feel like crap. So you have to find the right amount. And that's why carb cycling can be huge. That's why John Heck, we had him on the show. We talked to him extensively about his diet protocol and how he puts it together. And he's got it very particular. He does a great job. He does a great job with it. But just understand that if you are trying to look good from an aesthetic standpoint, you have to lower at least one macronutrient. And in many cases, you may have to lower 2 macronutrients. So even take the case of keto. Even take the case of keto. Like in keto case, you're going to lower your carbs. Your carbs are going to be down in the basement. They're going to be like hardly any carbohydrate, just from like little trace amounts here and there. You are going to boost your fat up pretty high, usually to make sure that you have a nice energy flow coming in since you're not eating carbohydrates. And you might reduce protein. And that's when those keto guys get really gnarly looking. And that's when a keto guy can get really shredded. Is when they not only get rid of the carbohydrate, but when they also start to lower the protein a little bit. And when I say lower the protein a little bit, I'm not talking about them, cutting their protein in half right away or anything. They're just cutting it down a little bit. Someone who has 180 grams of protein because they weigh 180 pounds now has 100 grams of protein in a day. And maybe they bring it down to 80 or 75 because they're trying to be in ketosis. They're trying to get the body to run off of ketones. And that can have a dramatic impact and effect on somebody's body composition, as we've seen from Robert Sykes and some of the disciples of him, some of the people that he teaches and coaches. He's done a great job with all that stuff. And so, unfortunately, you might have to cut out 2 macronutrients sometimes. I bring up Chris Bumstead all the time because he had that 1,600 calorie a day diet that he was doing, getting ready for one of the Mr. Olympias. And if he's eating these little tiny mousy meals to get as shredded as possible, now it is only for a short time period, something to keep in mind. But if he's doing that, I mean, it should show you guys that, there's so much commentary about steroids all the time. It's like, man, if steroids did this work for us, then why are we eating 1,600 calories? If steroids did this work for us, we should be able to eat 4,600 calories or 3,000 calories. And you don't end up with that when you're trying to be Chris Bumstead, when you're trying to be a legend, you're trying to get on stage and kick everyone's ass, right? You end up in this exact position that I mentioned where you're probably lowering 2 macronutrients. In his case, he lowered fats considerably. And at some point, your coach is like, you get a half cup of rice 3 times a day. You're like, what? or whatever it was for him. Maybe his car, like every once in a while, these guys are a little different. And every once in a while, there's newer things out, like where somebody will like really bump up the carbohydrate at the end for some metabolic effect and different things like that. But, you know, for the most part, your food's pretty scarce. Bumstead in the video repeatedly mentions, you know, he's hungry and he's like, man, I'm hungry and he's tired and he's this and that. But he's not complaining. He's just marching through it the best he can. Because it's not fun, you know, eating like white fish and eating like turkey bacon instead of regular bacon. And you can also see, like, you know, in some of the videos, he also has other obligations. So even though he is a bodybuilder, and that's, you know, he's a professional bodybuilder that gets paid to do a lot of what he does, but it doesn't mean you don't have other obligations and other things. He's got a wife and kid, and it's all very challenging no matter how set up you are. You know, you can see in some of these videos of Bumstead's that he's got, you know, towers of supplements, and he's got things organized pretty good. And you could look at that and be like, oh man, it'd be so easy to be like him. But he wasn't always like this. He got to this point by being meticulous and by being someone that can figure out a way to eat 1,600 calories a day. And obviously 1,600 calories a day is not his main diet. But I've also mentioned in the past that a lot of times these guys, their fats are coming down 40 grams, stuff like that. Very common. It's common, and these guys are big, and this is the way they cut. This is the way they end up, you know, really losing a lot of that body fat. Now, keep in mind that you might not care to go that extreme like that. And so that might mean that you can have a little bit more of some of these macros. Like, is there really any reason for any of us to, you know, try, you know, exactly what Chris Bumstead does? I guess if we think there'd be a lot of like joy in that, like it's going to be a lot of fun to go and do that, then maybe you do, right? But without that, it's just like overkill, especially for someone that's like 20% body fat. Like, there's no reason for them to jump onto something that's so aggressive kind of out of nowhere, right? You would want, well, you can do things whatever way you'd like, but it'd probably be easier. Like going from 20% body fat to 10% body fat, you know, that's a huge change. You know, a 10% change is a massive change, but going from like 20 to 15, you shouldn't really need a very complicated diet to go from 20 to 15% body fat. If you're 30% body fat and you're thinking about, you know, 15% body fat, well, you're thinking maybe a little too far ahead, and you want to kind of knock these things out in like brackets. You go from, you know, 40% to, you know, 35%, from 35% to 32%, and so on. And as you go lower, it's going to be like less and less and less and less percentage that you're trying to get to. Not that anyone has like real body fat goals like that anyway, but you kind of get my point. But again, just to reiterate, just for anyone who's confused, restriction of some sort has to happen in order for most people that have excessive amounts of body fat on them now, in order for them to get themselves in the shape that they want to get into. If it's somebody that is just like maintaining body weight, well, maintaining body weight and you don't have like body weight issues, you're not really probably listening to this. But if you are, then you don't have to really do a lot of what I've just mentioned, because you already have some shit figured out. Your energy balance is already good. Your energy out is matching your energy in. And you're like, yeah, I don't know, man. I've been 220 for the last, or I've been 200, or I've been 170 for the last 4 years, and I don't really care to change. I feel pretty good with my body. I can run and jump and move around the way that I'd like, and well, then that's great. Again, you won't have to really pay too much attention to some of the stuff I mentioned. Maybe what someone in that case might want to do is just look at how their nutrition could maybe fuel their performance a little bit more, and they can get a little bit more into that side of things if they wanted to. So That would be, that would be an option there. I wanted to mention. Oh yeah, I got to read this other comment that we got.
You want me to read it?
Yeah. Read the other comment.
It says, let's see a video with agility using motor units, side to side, karaoke's running backwards, bear crawls pulling a sled.
You know what? Whoever sent that in, that guy's on crack. Because no one over the age of like 15 years old can do a crab crawl. You guys remember the crab crawl? Like maybe, Ryan, you could try to find a video of someone doing a crab crawl. They're impossible. I'm kind of kidding. They're not impossible. They are really hard. You're just crawling around on your hands and like the back of your, like you're crawling around on your, like with your hips up, and you're crawling around like on your heels and your hands. Like kills your wrists. Yeah. Anyway, very bizarre that somebody sent that in, that they wanted to see me do. Like, am I supposed to be wearing like a cop outfit or firefighter outfit or lingerie, like, or maybe a Mexican wrestling mask? It was a very weird request, and very weird requests on the specifics of the exercises. Like as if this person's gonna like, critique the video and break down the movement of my scapula and the internal and external rotation of my left and right hip. Yeah, look at those wrestling masks. Yeah, I'm working out with my buddies every day, almost every day. We've been doing like strongman stuff, and these are two big Mexican dudes from Woodland, and they have these Mexican wrestling masks. So we were just messing around with that yesterday. We were doing some weighted carries, some like sandbag carries, some grip bell work, like farmer carry type things. We were doing, in addition to the sandbag and the other stuff, I was doing some push-ups in between. Before all this, we did a bunch of overhead work, and I got my ass kicked. Both these guys are so much bigger than me. I'm 215, 220 pounds. These guys are, one guy's 330 and the other guy's 260. So that's my excuse, is that they're bigger than me, but really I'm just weaker than them. That's actually just the truth of it. And they whoop my ass on the overhead pressing, but I'm able to keep up with them pretty good on a lot of this stuff. These guys are also a lot younger than me, which is nice. One of them's like 12 years younger than me, and the other one's like 20 years younger than me. So it's really nice to have some young people, pushing you, and when you're able to keep up with them, or when you're able to beat them. And the way that I can beat them is just through like stamina, endurance, that sort of thing. But yeah, man, I thought that was really weird that guy sent that in like that about, these real particulars of what he wants me to do. Oh, look at that, a hard hat. There we go. It was really weird with those particulars, but you know what? Maybe I'll be up for the challenge. Maybe I'll do it. Bear crawling with the sled. That's an interesting one. That's pretty cool. I don't know where I would do that though. Like, I'm thinking like the surface, like the ground here is way too hot this time of year to try to figure that out. I could maybe do it somewhere on the grass, but I'm not really sure. But I'll definitely take you up on the offer of the back pedals, the karaokes, or whatever they're called. That stuff's fun. Side shuffles, all that stuff is a lot of fun. And actually, probably at this point, probably be pretty good for my foot. Still working through some of the foot stuff. Ryan's working on a video now. I detailed stuff about my foot like you wouldn't believe in an upcoming video. I talked about the different shoes I'm wearing. I talked about the different ways I'm digging into my heel and trying to fix whatever the hell is wrong with my foot in the first place, whether it's a bone spur or or whatever the heck it is, plantar fasciitis or like a tendinopathy or something like that. To me, it feels like the bottom of my Achilles tendon, where it ties into my heel, is somehow compromised. So anyway, I got to keep working on that. I'm going to see doctors for it. I've been doing all kinds of stuff for it. So I will get it better. I am working on it diligently, but just wanted to share this with you guys today because sometimes there seems to be confusion and, you know, somebody shouting out like, hey, explain how I lost 70 pounds on the carnivore diet. It's like, well, I just did. Like, are you not listening to the video? Like I said that you have to have restriction. I didn't say the only restriction that you have is just restricting fat. Secondly, I think it's really important that you guys understand you have many options when it comes to your diet. But there's still going to be some laws of restriction in there. Whether it's time restricted feeding or whether it's you're restricting your carbohydrates or whether you're restricting your fat, that is the way that it works. Whatever you were doing previously, if you're fat, you were doing something in abundance, right? Can we just say that way, right? If you're fat or fatter than you'd like to be, then you were doing something in abundance at some point, and your body decided, hey, let's store this energy, and it's now stuck to your body, and you're trying to figure out how to get it unstuck from your body. One great way to do that is a very low-fat diet. One great way to do that is a low macronutrient, one way to do it is with low fat. One way to do it is with low carb. You can kind of pick either one, or you can split the difference and you can have a more balanced diet if you're someone who can do that, which a lot of people really struggle with that. They tend to go up and down in body weight a lot with that. Remember, what I'm talking about a lot of times is like getting in shape, getting like lean, not necessarily even just like shredded, but just getting lean and then just staying there. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about like, you know, one person peels their shirt off and the other person's like, yeah, you know, give me a couple weeks. It's like, oh, come on, dude, that's lame. What do you mean, give me a couple weeks? Like you're either ready for it or you're not. And I like to be ready for it. I like to be in shape. I like to be lean, and it's just kind of the route that I decided to go. And I know a lot of you want to do the same thing, and you're hearing, you know, a lot of conflicting messages. Lastly, I'll just talk real briefly about like just the food. I bought some Simply potatoes recently, and there's a video there, and I took those and put them on my waffle maker with some egg whites in them. They were really good without egg whites. They were good with egg whites. I've kind of mixed it up, but that thing works great because it will like kind of make them a little crispy, and they have to be in there for a while. And you make sure you don't overstuff the thing too much. But look at that. That came out pretty damn good. And me trying to get the thing out of there and stuff was like a little bit weird, but I got it out of there, and it was awesome. And I threw some steak on top of it. It was some egg whites and some Simply potatoes, which you just buy at the grocery store. They're pretty much already seasoned. I throw a little bit more salt on them. I just like things to be salty. You can also throw a little cheese on them. Like if you cook them, if you cook it with some egg whites and you cook it with a little bit of mozzarella cheese, it'll make it like 87 times better. So you might as well just sacrifice and throw just a little bit of fat on there by throwing a little bit of that stuff on there. But and then you can see I'm drinking it with some kefir, and so I got some. That's our electrolyte product. That's on our website. It's called Salt Plus, and it's basically just unflavored. It's unflavored hydration. We sell hydration, fruit punch, and chocolate, and salted caramel, and a bunch of other flavors. And then we sell it unflavored, and the unflavored one is in a shaker bottle, like a salt shaker bottle. So you can just have it like on your counter and just mix it in with your food. It's awesome. Tastes great. It's actually salty, but it has just a tiny speck of like sweetness to it too, which you're not going to really be able to detect, but if you just put it on your finger, you'll probably notice that being maybe just a little bit different from salt. And you're going to buy that. You can purchase that over at MarkBellSlingshot.com, which has everything. MarkBellSlingshot.com now has all the Within You brand products. It has the Total Carnivore product. It has steak shakes. It also has slingshots, hip circles, knee sleeves, elbow sleeves, the whole thing. And if you haven't ever tried any of that stuff out, you know, give it all a shot. That's a way you guys can repay me for this information that I'm always giving you guys. And I always appreciate the support. Strength is never weakness. Weakness is never strength. Catch you guys later. Bye.